Hi everybody, I am Yogendra Deva, your host for today's inaugural session of the Dhawan Academy's Open House. This is the first one in a series of open houses on topics suggested by you and with which we will return regularly in due course of time. We have received as many as 100 topics from the brochures we circulated amongst you. And for today's session, the common interest topic which we have selected is strategy of investigations for long tunnels, defining knowns and unknowns by our own Dr. Gopal Dhawan, the founder and chairman of the DDAG Private Limited, that is Dhawan Academy. I welcome you once again to this program. Please feel free to raise your queries. These queries we would receive in the chat box. You give your queries there and we shall take these up one after the other immediately after the presentation. Don't worry, if your query is not answered due to time constraint, we shall revert with answer by mail. And now it is over to Dr. Gopal Dhawan. Dr. Gopal Dhawan, please.
Today, in this open house, we are going to discuss strategy of investigations for long tunnels, particularly for defining knowns and unknowns along the tunnels. I am going to cover this brief presentation of about 35 minutes in 4 segments, starting from defining the problem, then what tools do we have for investigations, what are the risks and how to manage them, and then what should be our future strategy. All of us know that tunneling technology has improved significantly in other countries, particularly developed countries, and even not so developed countries like China, Taiwan, Turkey, and many other countries. Tunneling progress is good, but in India we feel that we are a bit laggard in the race, and our tunnel excavation is not more than 60 meters per month per phase. Even deployment of TBM has not helped us in completing tunneling projects on time. Examples, there are several examples, but the live examples which can be quoted today are Parvati 2 project, it's a hydropower project, and Tapovan Vishnughat project, it is also a hydropower project, where initially TBMs, when they were deployed, we had good progress. But once they got stuck due to some problem or other, it took a lot of time in contract resolution. And even after new contractors were deployed, progress of TBMs is also not good. We have not done well in the unknown ground. And conventional investigations have provided limited understanding of the ground. So therefore, there is a need to investigate tunnel alignments in a better manner with a backup of modern investigating techniques. Therefore, today we have chosen this topic from the academy to discuss some strategy of investigations which will reduce the percentages of unknowns along the tunnel route. So what are these known unknowns and unknown unknowns? You see, the tunneling media, where you know that geologically what you are going to get and where you are going to get and what would be the properties of those rock mass and rock mechanic properties are fairly known. On the other hand, in reaches where the situation is known unknowns, you know that what geology we are going to encounter. You also know that what are the types of problems. Suppose in case you may find repeatedly shear zones or some high ingress of water zones or crush zones. So you know that these are there in this reach, but where they will occur is not known. And then unknown unknowns. I neither know what I am going to encounter and nor I know where I am going to encounter. So these 3 things are, it is understood that known knowns can be dealt by good design of the rock masses, of the support system. And then known unknowns can be here problems can be mitigated by appropriate contractual architecture. And in unknown unknowns, this can also be tackled reasonably well if we embed the investigation methodology during the construction phase. But still there will be some residual uncertainties. So let's see how we proceed. This is a general view of topography in Himalayas. Suppose in case a tunnel is to be constructed along this red line. So tunnel will be somewhere underneath this mountain, and we need to know geology along this alignment. Now you can imagine that most of the area is covered with foliage. Terrain is inaccessible. Geology in Himalayas is not simple everywhere, it is complex. We don't see very many outcrops. It is my personal assessment that in these type of terrains, we don't get more than 3 or 4% of outcrops. And then we cannot deploy deep investigative techniques because of terrain limitations. And this is a live example of a project in Bhutan, which is known as Chamkarchu project. I was doing investigation of these projects in between 2010 and 2012, and then this picture was taken. So now when we start from here, do some kind of geological mapping and take help of regional geological data also, we get this kind of geological section along the tunnel alignments. It's a very general kind of a setup that what all you can get. So we can define the rock types. We can also define various structural breaks. But within these rock types, for example, say these the garnetiferous quartzite, we know that this is the name of this rock type. But within this zone, there may be 3 or 4 subzonations, which we call geostructural units. So that is very difficult to define based on geological mapping alone. And then based on this data, which is, I mean, there are 3 to 4% of outcrop, and practically more than 50% are not accessible. So based on 1 or 2% of outcrop, we try to project geology all along the tunnel. And then finally, because of some contract requirements and design requirement, we are required to give rock mass classifications along the tunnel route also, and try to prepare these small pie diagrams. But these are sometimes misleading because the designer does not know what are your limitations, and he will go as if these numbers are perfect, and we will get 72% rock mass which will conform to class 3, and so on and so forth. So in general, if we compare that, what is the confidence level of a conventional approach, we will see that known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and unknown unknowns are equally divided. So 33% of the tunnel route, wherever tunnel is not very deep, in those areas which are near to portals, or due to some other reason, rock cover is not more. So we can identify the risk in these areas very well, and we can also design the rock support systems based on projections, geological projections, and rock mass classifications data collected during mapping. And suppose in case the same geological mapping concept is supported with our strategic approach, you will see we can go up to 60%, not more than that, 60% for known areas. So when percentage of known areas increases, the known unknowns and unknown unknowns shrink. So therefore, strategically planned investigations convert gray areas, and literally the gray areas in the picture also, these are gray, to knowns, to known knowns, to a great extent, not fully. So Uh, investigation, now we will discuss that what is there at our command for doing investigation. And investigation is a methodology of acquiring advanced knowledge of site conditions so that techno-economically viable tunnel layout can be done. And it's a common sense that if we do good quality investigation and uh, do full adequate investigations, give adequate time for investigations, invest required amount of money, there will be less uncertainties in our tunnel. There will be less cost claims and maybe less time overrun also. So therefore, we are required to develop a good geological model of the area, optimize the suitable layout of the tunnel, and to assess rock mass conditions along the proposed tunnel. Foremost is to forecast geological problems which are going to come during tunneling, then design the support and estimate cost and time required for completion of tunnel so that it should not be so squeezed that we are always behind the schedule. So how much can we investigate? Because maybe that till now I might be sounding that if we do, if we evolve a good strategy of investigations, we can predict 100%. No, that is not. This is a ISRM figure in which along the x-axis you will find we have plotted acquisition of geological and geotechnical data, and on the y-axis, which is blue, we have plotted percentage of unforeseen problems, that is risk. So you see, as we proceed further along the x-axis, we will see that this blue line slowly comes down and the risk reduces. Theoretically, if there is 100% data is acquired, so risk will be 0%, but it never happens. And how much we can get? So if you see the other curve, which is brown, you keep on investing more and more money, and with this increase in investment, you get more and more data. But after 60%, you will see that this brown curve becomes almost very steep initially and then almost vertical, asymptotic. So it means that no matter how much money you invest, you can't go beyond 80%. So this is the area of known knowns, which I had shown in the pie diagram. And this is the area of residual problems. Normally, all of us deploy all these tools, starting from geological mapping. And when we say geological mapping, it includes all surface techniques, including remote sensing, photogrammetry, etc. During the outcrop mapping, we record all geotechnical parameters which are proposed by ISRM. Then we do some drifting, particularly in the low cover reaches or in the portal areas. Then normally I have found that people do some little drilling only in the low cover reaches. But in India, practice of doing deep drilling is not yet in vogue. Now we have started applying a lot of geophysics, but integration of geophysical data with geology needs to be done. And then, in my opinion, we should do a lot of rock mechanic testing. If we can do that, we will be in a position to understand what are the rock types along the tunnel alignment, and we will be able to establish adequacy of rock cover in the low cover reaches. The stress related problems can be forecasted, and then expected rock classes to some extent in the known areas can also be assessed. And then with nowadays, particularly in TBM tunnels, we have found that water has emerged as the biggest enemy. So these zones are to be identified, and all weak zones are required to be identified. If we can do that, it will minimize risks. Beyond conventional methods, nowadays, there are modern techniques which can be deployed, and people are using it day by day. It is LiDAR-based mapping, airborne geophysical surveys. Particularly nowadays in new contracts, we are finding that electromagnetic survey, airborne EM surveys are being applied, then directional drilling and TSP during construction. There are design requirements also. And for meeting these design requirements, we have to do a lot of laboratory testing, in situ testing. And in case your tunnel is to be driven by, excavated by TBM, so some elaborate testing, rock magnetic testing is to be done for collecting those parameters. RMR and Q system both have emerged as a very helpful tool for designing tunnel supports by empirical methods. Many times people ask questions that which system is better. In my opinion, both the systems are better, and this is based on a paper by Benevsky and Barton, which they have written together in 2008, where they state that RMR and Q are found to be equally effective for very poor and very good rock masses. Briefly, I will cover the risks also. So, you see, geological study should be aimed at identifying all types of major risks. But at the same time, terrain limitations in investigations are to be appreciated, the picture I have shown you. Then geophysics and exploratory drilling is to be used judiciously. In my opinion, we should go for deep drill holes, and we should, in case we are able to identify the poor zones along the tunnel alignment, all these zones should be investigated by drill holes. Nowadays, techniques are available, but in our country, I think we are a bit shy in applying those techniques. Then suitable provisions to be made in contract, because whatever cannot be assessed, in case we cannot forecast with confidence, then some contracts for unknowns are to be kept. And before starting a tunnel project, we must identify geological and hydrological risks. Some typical risks which we encounter during tunneling are tunnel running into overburden, unexpected fault zones, squeezing and rock burst. Number 3 is weak zone, sheared, crushed and fractured rock masses. Then variation in predicted rock classes or rock types affecting the completion schedule. And finally, groundwater with high discharge that hampers tunneling work. This was the root cause of problems in Parvati Stage 2 project. Ian Smith has proposed a risk matrix for Himalayan tunnels. What he says is that you, first of all, quantify likelihood of a risk, which could be rare, unlikely, possible, likely, or almost certain. And on the other axis, you divide it into consequences from insignificant to catastrophic. And if you do that, this matrix will finally help you in identifying all the risks in 4 categories. And for every category, there is an action plan. He has further given description. I have given you about 5 or 6 risks, but he has further subdivided those major risks into subcategories. And in this column, smaller column, you will find the risk description and then possible mitigation measures. For time constraints, I will not be in a position to do justice with this, but you can have a look yourself, and it is self-explanatory. Now, what strategy we should do? Here should be our focus. You see, in early stages of investigations, what we should do? In my view, an early reconnaissance visit helps in identifying the problems and to avoid problematic areas. Because suppose in case of hydropower projects, you can make a tunnel on right bank or left bank. If you identify the broad problems or geological risks in advance, you can avoid one of the banks and straight away go to the other bank or go deep inside the mountain. So this is how the initial reconnaissance visit will be helpful. Then before this, we should have good topo sheets studies, remote sensing studies, and all available regional geological maps. Luckily, in our country, Geological Survey of India has done geological mapping of almost entire country. Maybe exact figure is about 99%. So for all areas, you get some regional map, and there are some other maps which are published by other researchers. So all this literature survey should be done, and based on that, we should identify geological contexts and low cover zones, and particularly all the weak zones area, thrust areas. In many cases, major thrust in Himalayas are associated with thick shear zones or crushed zones. Before we go to another stage, after doing this, I should say before launching the feasibility stage of a tunneling project, we should initiate airborne electromagnetic survey for entire area. It is very useful in Himalayas. And for low cover reaches, we can also employ seismic reflection surveys, resistivity profiling or imaging, or even some other kinds of geophysical surveys can be deployed, and these can be deployed in tandem, and then these are to be integrated with the geological. After doing this, when we initiate actual feasibility stage, we should start it with good engineering geological map, which we call EGM. So EGM on a 5000 scale is good enough, and this EGM has to be integrated with geophysical results and remote sensing data. Overall geological model is developed, and rock types as expected in the tunnel are identified. Geological contexts are established again, because initially what you did was those were based on regional geology. Now based on your own geological mapping, you will identify contexts of your geostructural units for further studies during the detailed investigation. Then rock mechanic testing, petrology for various rock units. Then some short holes in the low cover reaches and portal areas are to be completed during this phase. With this background, when we embark upon detailed investigation stage, we will have geological and geotechnical maps, but these are to be reinterpreted in light of fresh data, particularly after integration of exploratory drilling, short holes, and rock mechanic testing. And this is the stage when geotechnical assessment and rock mass classification is developed for each geostructural unit. A geostructural unit means that a unit in which you will have same lithology, same jointing pattern, same nature of joints, aperture, spacing, and other joint properties should also be same. It should have more or less same uniaxial compressive strength. So based on whatever data you collect during your outcrop survey and whatever rock mechanic testing you have done, you need to identify these geostructural units on your map. In other sense, on a EGM, these are the smallest mappable units also. And rock mass classification for known conditions greatly help in estimation of rock support and whatever treatment is required. Why I have taken out this known conditions? Because after doing geological mapping, rock mechanic testing, remote sensing, some deep drilling, geophysical surveys, most of the areas will be converted to known areas. And if you know properties of rock mass, a good designer will give you good tunnel supporting system in advance. And in case you keep on providing your support system in time, there is highly unlikelihood that you will fall into trouble. During this stage, risk assessment is done with special attention to all major lineaments, fracture zones, shear zones, nala crossings, and unexpected geohydrological conditions. Of late, attention towards geohydrological conditions, particularly for TBM tunnels, is very important. And all poor rock mass zones should be confirmed by deep drilling or directional drilling. So you see, these are not falling in the known areas. These are still known unknowns. So in known unknowns, you can't depend upon the support charts given by designers. You will have to take decision on the ground also. And finally, it is better that after doing your all DPR work, develop a good geotechnical baseline report which can be inserted into the contract document. So finally, we will be in a position after the detailed investigation stage, we will be in a position to define known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Uh, Once these are identified, then we will have to script necessary conditions to deal with particularly known unknowns and unknown unknowns in our contract. So identify them and necessary conditions are to be scripted in the contract. Finally, with all this database, good support design charts and instrumentation plan, which is very important for any TM method for each GSU or geostructural unit can be evolved. This is a flowchart developed by me during my PhD, which was on tunnel support system for and rock quality parameters, wherein, in short, in the central portion, we segregate data which we collect on outcrops, and for each geostructural unit, we segregate the geotechnical data. Out of this, we take out the orientation readings, and in this vertical, finally we do structural stability analysis. In the central portion, we classified this data for rock mass classification and evolve the support design by empirical methods, whatever empirical methods are available to us, and take help of Q system, RMR system, GSI system. And in the discontinuity orientation analysis, we do structural stability analysis and evolve a support design for kinematically feasible blocks. You mean wedge, various kinds of wedges. And the general parameters, particularly rock strength and the height of the overburden cover, will help you in defining the strength stress failure assessment. And all three, if they are integrated together, will optimize your support system. So with this, I'm almost towards the end of my presentation. And before I conclude, I would like to say that we should investigate adequately. And we should do all essential testing, because in my personal opinion, we investigate, in case I take example of a hydropower project, we investigate dams and powerhouses reasonably well. But tunnels are somehow not given the due importance. So for tunnels also, we will have to do a lot of rock mechanic testing as proposed in this strategy. And then we should be ready for mid-course correction in the contract. Adequate clauses should be built in for mid-course correction in contract. Then a right agency for long tunnels is to be identified, because contractor should be good. And prepare a risk management plan for all difficult trenches which you are going to encounter. And quick decision is key to the success. If we can do that, we will be in a position to complete our tunnels reasonably in good time. Thank you very much. Hand it over to Mr. Deva.
Thank you, Dhawan sir. It's always a great pleasure listening to you, your talks, and today was no different. I think this talk must have been very useful to our participants, and I think you give us 7 extra minutes for discussions part, but we don't have many queries. At the moment, we have got only 3 queries. So now I will be sharing these queries here, and you can tackle these queries. In the meantime, if we have some more time after that, I think we can invite some other persons on microphones to share their views or share some more queries. So I will just list out the queries. Here they are.
Yeah,
So there are 4 queries from 3 persons. So
I will now mute my microphone and you can take them. In case there is any problem in understanding the query, so we can request the person concerned to take the mic and tell us what exactly he means.
Okay, so I take one by one. What is the suitable investigation type of unknown type area? And I think this is the second part of the question. In design purpose, need some numerical value for geophysical survey, we get the value. If yes, then how much percent is reliable for design? Well, I think this question is asked by Mr. Arvind Anand Pandey. Pandeyji, first of all, we need to identify what is unknown. And this has to be done during our initial engineering geological mapping. And once you know that which area is unknown and how much you can know, because if you remember the ISRM figure, it imposes some limitations. Even after doing best investigations, you can't predict 100%. So once you know the type of your unknown, you will have to select the method. Now, suppose in case there is you expect a big shear zone at the tunnel grade which you have projected from surface, and it is intersecting the tunnel from maybe from RDX to RDY. And in case it is 300 or 400 meter deep, and you have equipment for going 300-400 meter deep, or even say deeper than that, so you should do some drilling. In case you don't have deep drilling machines, try to know that where this thick shear zone is going to intersect at a shallower depth, and then do some angular hole for that. In some other cases, depending upon the problem, geophysical surveys can also be helpful to you. So it depends upon the type of problem, the type of area, your accessibility, your preparedness for applying modern techniques. So my question to your answer is that there is no standard method of investigation for all unknown areas. As far as your question for geophysical surveys are concerned, in my opinion, these are because while I was in NHPC, we used to deploy this method, and estimation was quite good. But as a word of caution, I would say that in case you have to select parameters for numerical methods, nowadays apply Hoek and Brown's, Hoek's criteria, GSI criteria, Geological Strength Index. It's quite useful. There are certain softwares which give you rock mass parameters based on your inputs of the rock mass, and then you should always calibrate whatever data you are getting through these empirical methods through your actual rock metric testing in the sample areas. The second question is, any project in India where LiDAR and airborne geophysical surveys are being implemented? As far as my information goes, not in India. LiDAR is being used extensively in Nepal in many projects, and people are claiming success of that. As far as airborne geophysical surveys are being implemented, in NHPC we have used these methods for defining the low cover reaches, particularly for assessment of overburden in low cover reaches, and also we are using TSP in a very convincing manner. But nowadays the actual geophysical application is being done by a lot of transportation tunneling agencies, wherein I am finding that EM surveys have become almost integral part of investigation programs of contracts which are coming from NHIA. NHAI. So day by day, people are using it. Then it was perhaps asked by Mr. Sindwani, how far geophysical survey investigations are considered risky in comparison to actual exploratory drilling in unapproachable areas during the tender investigation stage. You see, geophysical surveys have their own limitations. There is no doubt about it. And but you have said that in unapproachable areas, and there are areas, believe me, because I have investigated several tunnels, and there are areas where even boats cannot go, uh, uh, leave apart human beings. So how can you take big drilling machines in those areas? So in case you can't do nothing, so geophysics is certainly better. And in case you can calibrate your geophysical results in the known areas, like you do, this truth. Yeah, you do ground truthing in remote sensing. So geophysics has to be integrated or calibrated with the known geological areas. I have seen that many a times there is hesitation on part of geologists to part away their data. And they say that, first of all, let the geophysics give us their result. But in my view, we should share our data with the geophysicist so that he can calibrate. I think Mr. Rajendra Arora will be happy with this answer. And the screen is moving. I think few questions are skipped, Mr. Deva. And I can now see the question from Mr. Ajosh. So, yeah, your screen is moving very fast. Just hold it here, I think I can take a question from Mr. Rajendra Arora, which is a bit long. How far geophysical services? Okay, this I have answered. Then remote sensing. I think it is wrongly spelled. Remote sensing role in tunnel. RS only see mountain, terrain not underground. Please clarify. I find it difficult to understand what Mr. Neeraj Joshi is asking. I can understand he is asking role of remote sensing. Remote sensing only see mountain, terrain. Okay. So I think some punctuation is difficult to understand, but now I get the question. Okay, the questioner, Mr. Joshi, is asking that what is the role of remote sensing in tunnel, and particularly from remote sensing we see only the mountain. So how can you predict some rock mass which is underneath, because tunnel is to be constructed underground? Well, Mr. Joshi, I think if you discuss with any good person who is applying remote sensing, he will clarify this question much better than me. But as far as I can understand, based on remote sensing, first of all, we get a good lineament map, which perhaps we cannot even do if we map area on a very big scale. So because in remote sensing, the advantage is you can see entire area synoptically. And nowadays, there are imageries of very high resolution. And there are very powerful softwares. And at least you will agree with me that it will be very much helpful to calibrate your geological map for particularly those areas where you could not go because of access limitations. So once your map is updated, or wherever there was gaps, those areas are some more information, it complements your geological map. And then nowadays, through some softwares, if you remember initially, if you do photogrammetry, you can even see the the dip and strike of foundations, of rock formations. So remote sensing is not complete if you don't integrate the ground geology into it. But remote sensing does wonders in updating your geological map if you deploy remote sensing in a particular, in a proper manner, and use available GIS platforms. It is useful. This much I can say. Then the second.
Naman
Ji.
there is a second question from Rajendra Arora. How does midterm correction can be done in EPC contracts? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, wonderful. You see, in EPC contract, it is a bit difficult because you have given the complete contract. But while giving the EPC contract, if you built in a condition that in case we call it EGO, this is extraordinary geological conditions. If you meet any condition which perhaps cannot be predicted in the early stages, then let there be some risk sharing by the owner also. If that is done, I think that will be a kind of midterm correction. But it is certainly difficult, and maybe if Deva sir, you allow Mr. R.N. Mishra to answer this question. Mr. R.N. Mishra ji is there. I think he must be listening, or he can make a comment at the end of this.
Okay.
Sir, can you hear?
Okay, we can call him later on. But
Okay.
we have now only 4 minutes left.
Yes, you can call me later on. You can call me later on.
Mr. Saab, you can come right now if you want.
Yeah, Mr. Sir, just a good, intervention from your side will be helpful.
Yeah, it's you are right that in the EPC contract, there is normally no provisions for taking such conditions. But one thing is there that in the EPC contract, normally the contractor is supposed to have done the investigations themselves, and they give the design and other things. Therefore, in EPC contracts assumes that contractor has already taken into account the uncertainties while bidding it. But sometimes such a condition may arise, and at that time only the mutual wisdom of both the parties, that they have to understand that, okay, this is a condition which we could have never considered, which we could have never anticipated. So we negotiate it, though it may be out of the contract. That mutual understanding can only help under the provisions of contract, existing provisions of contract. Such a thing may not be possible to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Naman Saab, please proceed.
Okay. So now the next question: how does physiomechanical properties of rock help in tunnel excavation and support? You see, one of the if you enlarge your question, that convert it into rock mechanic testing. So if you do this UCS of some samples, you will be in a position to calibrate your rock mass rating results. And strictly the physiomechanical properties, in case you do a physiomechanical analysis of the shear zone material, this will also be helpful to you for finding out C and phi along these weak zones. Then how to calculate stress factors in tunnel? Generally, because these are under very high mountain covers, so the vertical cover, which is taken from the rock cover, I mean the height of cover into G, that is sufficient to estimate the stress factors. And in case you apply Q system of Barton, you can follow his system also. Then I think there are so many other questions, but some are missing. Rahul Sharma is asking, in India, tunnel construction companies. Your screen is moving very fast, so I can't focus on the question. Somebody has asked, I checked whole layout of Parvati 2. I found surprised as whole HRT passes along a lot of nalas. Still, we proposed most tunneling via TBM, uh, which indicating assessment. Anyway, you see what the question wants to say is when there were so many nalas, first of all, perhaps why the tunnel was laid in this mountain, and if it was laid, why TBM was deployed. You see, in Himalayan terrain, you can't find even half a kilometer of slope where you will not find small or big depressions. And nalas are not enemies of tunnel alignment. Even in Chamera stage 1, the entire tailrace tunnel has been excavated below the Ravi river. The only thing is you should know that what is there inside the nala, under the nala. And lot of nalas have been crossed without any problem. And the problem which occurred in Parvati was not directly related to any nala alignment. These are the professional hazards, and you have to take a decision because selecting a tunnel alignment is not only based on geology. You have to consider so many other factors. I think we can take this question in a bit more detail if time permits, but I think I will have to proceed to some other question. Yeah, please move your screen.
There is one from Jatinder. How to calculate stress factors in tunneling?
I have answered that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now it is from Ratan Das.
In Luri project of SJVN, LiDAR survey technique was used. Good information. However, Luri does not have a tunnel, just for information. Okay, good information, Mr. Das. The only thing I would like to know is whether there was tunnel or not. LiDAR is not always used only for tunnel. I mean, it is a faster method of doing topographic surveys. What we want to know is from you, and if in case you can answer through the chat box, how reliable was this survey for Luri project? So there is a counter question.
Naman sir, just
okay. This is by Mr. R.N. Mishra.
Yes, this is by Mr. R.N. Mishra.
So Mishra ji, that's a good intervention from you once again. But was it really reliable?
Actually, the LiDAR survey was done at the time of preparation of the DPR, and as I understand, the LiDAR survey was quite fast and quite reliable also. But this was done at the stage of DPR. The project had not come into construction at that time. But this was quite fast and reliable.
Thanks for your update. I mean, that is the basic purpose of this, fast and reliable. And in Nepal, I have seen some projects where reliability is also good.
We are left with only 3 minutes, and there are only 3 queries left. One by Ratan Das. In India, tunnel construction companies do not share any kind of data for research purpose. Scholars are not even allowed to enter a tunnel during construction. What will you suggest to scholars?
I think that's a wrong approach that tunneling construction companies rather, in my opinion, they should do a lot of R&D, and they should utilize committed research scholars who are ready to help them. In my opinion, these research scholars should somehow force their universities to have good interaction with the industry and try to take up projects which are of some industrial value. Sometimes later we can work on it. In mineral exploration field, particularly in Himalayas, there is a lot of industry, academia interactions, and there is a fund which is given to the industry for research only. So some kind of model can be evolved. So this is one. And now in 1 minute, I would like to answer Mr. Ravi Kumar, who says, why only RMR and Q? Why only RMR and Q are empirical? Why not other methods like ground types ones? Wonderful suggestion, Ravi. You see, certainly ground type and behavior types are very, very useful. We call GTBT. GTBT are coming in vogue in a lot of highway tunnels nowadays. And but the problem is what I have experienced, and particularly the tunnels which are being done by NHAI at a lot of projects. In contracts, lot of work has been done on GTBT, but finally, the geologist on the ground fall back off on RMR and Q for identifying ground type. So somehow in India, this philosophy has not percolated on the ground in a better manner. We have to educate our people in a way so that they apply GTBT in for the purpose for which it has been designed. Because in case you have to assess your rock type based on RMR, because the number of rock classes are much more in GTBT than RMR or Q. So we can discuss further. I think we can discuss this on telephone. Are exploratory drifts required? Any other alternative so far? You see, exploratory drifts are not required along the tunnel alignment per se. Maybe deep drilling. The alternative is deep drilling. And if you see case study of Gotthard Tunnel in Switzerland, a 1.5 kilometer thick marl zone, which was very soft, was predicted during the investigation stage. And they have driven a directional drill hole piercing this 1.5 kilometer thick, 1.5 kilometer thick zone through the directional drill hole. So if we can do that, nothing can beat it. Drifts could be useful only in the portal areas or maybe selectively in some low cover zones. I think, will you allow Devasar to answer the last question?
Yeah, I think we have got only 3 minutes left. So you just leave 1 minute for me. In 2 minutes, you can answer the 2 questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. How to calculate SRF internally? If there is no shear zone and RQD is between 80 to 85%, can we classify overburden material if it is already mentioned in DPR? What is the parameter of overburden material? I will answer in a reverse manner. You see, parameters of overburden are to be seen as per the soil mechanics practices. And normally, geologically, we define overburden as slope parts or riverboard material or whatever. But in case you want to have values of the C and phi along overburden, you will have to fall back on soil mechanics practices and do some testing. Can we classify overburden material? Yes, we can classify. You can see any standard EGM which is done by us for investigation of tunnels. How to calculate SRF? Barton has proposed a elaborate method for calculating SRF. I don't have the chart, so I can't answer in a very short time. But in case you have any problem, Mr. Tomar, please speak to me or send your query to me on email. In the end of my presentation, you will find my email number. Thank you very much, Mr. Deva. I think I left 1 minute.
Thank you, Dhawan Saab. You have been very punctual. I mean, this is GDAG's USP now. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
I will thank you very much for your excellent presentation, the way you handled all the queries of our participants. I will thank the participants for raising the queries and giving life to this.
Sir, can Can I make my presence felt in this
Yes.
webinar
Yes, please.
by complimenting Dr. Gopal Dhawan for a wonderful lecture? It has been, I think, a very good initiation of this webinar. And I have one small query that you have mentioned in your lecture, that we must resort to modern techniques, particularly airborne surveys. I have one small query in this regard, that when you do the airborne surveys, is it mandatory to supplement it or to confirm it by the conventional geological mapping in the field? Or is it sufficient if you have done airborne surveys and that is good enough for assessing the tunneling medium?
For our participant, that was Dr. Prabhas Pandey, as seismologist expert in the country.
Pandeyji, I think your question is to me. Well, the practice which I see normally, the geophysical agencies provide the EM data to the departments, and now it depends from project to project and formulation of contract based on requirements of those agencies. If you wish, you can ask them to do some kind of ground truthing and express the confidence level. Or otherwise, you take that data from them and integrate with your geological map yourself. And it all depends upon, this is a very latest practice which is coming to India. And I think maybe we have only results of one or two projects as of now. So we need to see that how well it is integrated.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everybody. It was nice having all of you for this session. We will be back with our next session very soon.